Welcome back. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And I have in studio a brother that came in for like something short, but definitely has been someone aware of Detroit is Different for a while. In community, doing a lot of work and a lot of advocacy. That advocacy of making sure that our environment is safe, but also definitely sometimes facing some political machines. And as we talk about political machines, he's in the thick of it all right now. He's a candidate for District 7 of the Detroit City Council. Denzell McCampbell, how are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Definitely. I told you before, I was like, I need you on for a full episode, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's more to talk about. We've been in rooms together before.
For sure.
You've seen me get boisterous and give my soliloquies and anecdotes.
We love it.
About so much of Detroit, and
It's a lot.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
Definitely.
Yes.
Thank you. And
Absolutely.
you've definitely threw your hat in the ring and heightened some other voter engagement before. But right now, D7, man, and D7 has a new face as many of the districts have shifted.
Absolutely.
But that footprint, so people kind of know, is like I know neighborhoods by like high school. So
Right.
it's like more like McKenzie area. Cody, definitely. So it's touching Dearborn.
Yeah.
And it's coming through like that west side pocket of Detroit. At one point in time, we're looking at Fred Durhal that was in that seat,
Yes.
and no longer. But the district's even changing from what was before. And it puts you in a race, one of the tighter races, against someone that's a state rep.
Yes.
But we more so here talking about you today.
Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. So with that being said, man, we start these off with your backstory. How many generations deep is your fam to Detroit?
Wow. So I would say about 4 generations.
4 generations
Yeah.
deep.
So my dad is from Detroit.
Okay.
And my mom actually is from 25 miles outside of Selma. And I tell folks about their history in my family. My dad is retired from UAW. He went to Southeastern and got a job in the factories. And that was all he wrote, right, in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And really put our family through school with that factory job, that union job. My mom moved up here at the age of 18 from Alabama.
All right, now I'm so used to that Alabama story being like further generations, not necessarily so close. But now I got to ask your dad's side of the family, where did they come up from?
They also came from Alabama.
Whereabouts?
Around Marion, Alabama.
Okay,
Yep,
all right. But just still the Alabama roots.
Exactly.
It's a lot of people from Georgia and Alabama when you start talking to these black folks
Coming
with
to
these
Detroit.
interviews.
Yes,
Yeah, man.
yes.
But your mom coming, what was it that led her up here at 18?
You know, she told me about her. So she was the baby of 14.
Okay.
So
that is old school and Southern.
So one of my aunts was already up here in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Another aunt was in New York City. So she had went to New York City and lived with one of my aunts and then came here.
Okay, so she went to New York first.
Yes.
So it was like, okay, I like this auntie a little bit more. It's a bigger city. Let's go to New York. So you could be in Brooklyn right now.
Could be in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So here in Detroit.
So she went there, was like, this ain't clicking, and then she decided to come to Detroit.
Decided to come to Detroit and met my dad, and they were together, lived on the east side, on Alta Road, actually.
Okay, you mentioned the Juggaleers, Southeastern SC here.
Mm-hmm.
So East Side for show.
Yes.
At that point in time when they started. And did she have like a lot of other family here? Were like other aunts and aunties?
It was just her and my aunt for the most part. We have cousins here. The McCampbells are in the area like 7 Mile and 75 area. So they had cousins here, but it was mostly my mom and my aunt.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now I guess as we're framing so much of this, and they're starting off east, she meets your dad.
Yes.
And then he gets that Detroit gang. I'm being serious though. It's like he come with that charm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you need somebody to make sure you good in this city.
Right. They get together and then they move over to the 7 Mile and Ryan area. They're Persian, right?
Okay.
And that's where I grew up. I'm born and raised in that area.
All right, Persian area. We definitely support all that Doughboy love.
Yeah,
We've
for sure.
had so many talks. Shout out to Sydney James and what she just did with Blackout
Absolutely.
Walls.
Yes.
And talking that Conant Gardens area and all of those communities. What was it like for you growing up in that neighborhood?
You know, it was one of those neighborhoods that you felt secure in and that you felt community in. And that's something that I really talk to, and you can that's neighborhoods across the city of Detroit, right? That at once you have folks that all the elders on the block knew my name, all the families on the block knew my name, knew my family. We would go down the street. My mom was close friends with the neighbors across the street, right? All the kids knew each other, and it was that sense of community, right? And I tell folks about my upbringing on the East Side and my parents, and that sense of community is what led me to get into the public space organizing, right? Because with her growing up in Alabama and 25 miles outside of Selma during the Jim Crow era, she told me about her memories about seeing the dogs, the hoses, Black folks, of course, being beat and killed for simply wanting to vote, right? And so when I was growing up, she would actually wait. Her and my dad would wait after they got off of work, wait for me to get out of school, and take me to go vote with them.
Wow.
And
what was the first election? Because this happened with me at a young age, and I can share that. And I also got to say, you got to be an eyes on the prize kid too, probably. But what was the first election you remember going to?
Wow, the first, I think it had to be. I remember seeing like Sharon McPhail's name on it or something. So that's just the name that I remember, right? I also remember Kwame's first election as well going, but she would take me when I remember going when I was much younger, right? When I was just, at every election they would take me. But I just remember those names from
growing up.
Growing up, right?
Okay, because I definitely remember and Jesse Jackson actually won Michigan because of all these Detroiters. But I remember that election as a kid and going, and I brought up Eyes on the Prize because it was a PBS series, just so much about the civil rights movement that would play like almost it's like Roots and Eyes on the Prize. You sit down and you watch that. It was like tapping into Black history. Sadly, so much of what's happening from like a public sector is not as available, but this is even more so why spaces like I'll Keep a Line Village, the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, and a lot of the other keepers of history, source booksellers, it's even more important to introduce so much of that Black history.
You're right, because even as you bring that up, as you bring Eyes on the Prize, you don't know if you remember, and it's so interesting that ABC is in the news right now, but I don't know if you remember on the Sundays during Black History Month, of course it was Black History Month, but they would play like the Rosa Parks story and all of that, right? And I remember that movie too, because I remember sitting there watching it and tears were in my eyes, right? And because of not only me being this young Black kid and seeing this happen to folks who look like me, right? But also seeing like, at that point, I'm like, oh, my mom was in the middle of that.
Wow.
Right? And how we have these conversations about history and thinking that, oh, it was so far long ago that for some reason we are past that. For me to be at that age, like 8 years old, probably around that time, and 6, 7, or 8, and my mom is right there and had experienced that. So this was not something that, I just read in the history books and see or I see on TV. She's right there. And as we're now in this place where not only folks are erasing history, but also trying to roll back any sense of policies that we have had in place to try to reverse that, and to also try to, I wouldn't even give Black folks even a sliver of justice, of materials that we need to survive, and a place, right? And I say even a sliver because we know what we had was not enough.
Yeah. I remember, as you talk about that Rosa Parks story, I remember Miss Jane Pittman and me going to Aisha Shule. Shout out to School of the Gifted Child, one of the African Center schools that were here. So much of that was just so prevalent, but it was a wave as my interview and some of the clips are running out with Phil Simpson, kind of in that same community, really, like the Sojourner Truth Homes, which is kind of not far from there.
It was actually right behind. It was right by. So I grew up on Lamont, and then was Atkinson School, and then right behind Atkinson was the Sojourner Truth Homes.
And he went to Atkinson, and he was just talking about how that was a lot of the African-centered education at the time that was permeating in Detroit for many reasons, but that was even present in his schooling at Atkinson. As at one point in time, so much of tapping into that heritage was very prevalent in the educational system, even of children at a young age. It's like, yes, Black History Month in the 90s, Detroit, and you were in school, it was a thing.
And now it's this one has been commercialized, right? By folks who don't look like us. That's one thing. And then it's been even more whitewashed in a way. In this thought around, how do I put it in this way? I feel like one has been erased and whitewashed, right? And to try to make I bring this up because I've done organizing around in the movement for Black Lives, to push back against police violence in the city and across the country, to push against the over-policing and mass incarceration of our communities, and the aspect that we're in this place that we don't need further action, right? And I've often seen, and this is and what I mean by in Black, I mean by in this whole mass front, not by Black folks in our community, but that is we have what we need right now.
The I guess that narrative running now, and I didn't think we'd jump off into this so fast, but we here now. But the Black fatigue, like so many of these counterpoints, it's very much in these interviews, as people say, you talk more than the person being interviewed. But sometimes it's like we unlocking different things, but you can tell that this is like think tank theory and ways to push narratives and arguments. I'm not one to necessarily believe in everything is so premeditated and like it's a group of people that are adversarial to our community, that like all these plans are like so planned out. I don't think that happens, but I do think there are like many plans, and based on what happens, it's like, okay, we can run this. So like, I love the sports analogies. Like if it's, if it's third down and, you got sacked and now it's 22 yards, okay, now we can look at all of the plays in the playbook where you can try to get 30 yards. You're not considering that if you are like 2 yards away. So it's certain things that are happening about like arguments of Black fatigue. Can you take this away? Even the whole concept of like, critical race theory, and that being something from really more so something that is from a law school doctrine. But if we can propagate this and raise this discussion up, we can make it seem like, okay, now by presenting this to any student that's not Black, especially white Americans, that's making them feel guilty, which making them feel inferior, which is having a direct impact on their test scores, which is like, and it's like, that's not even anything to do with what critical race theory is. Exactly. But if I can present this disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and propaganda and pull that out and really tap on the hearts and minds how I'm tapping, hence that dog whistle, classic Ronald Reagan type of thoughts.
Yes.
Now we're presenting these arguments to sway favor, not just in policy, but in the ways that people respond and interact with one another, and the way that the economy starts functioning, because you're going to resource things less that would go into, as you would say, like Black history programs and that information, and having that accessible under the guise of like, okay, now you're deconstructing the value systems of these other students.
It really creates that slippery slope, right? If we allow ourselves to have conversations about, oh, we can remove this from education. We can remove this type of curriculum from
Yes.
education, right? If we say that, oh, like you said, if any student learning about Black history is critical race theory, then if I come to you and say, oh, anything under that we need to get rid of because, hey, remember critical race theory? Like you said, the dog whistles there. So, oh yeah, we're going to remove that out of curriculum. Then it gets to, well, my kids should be just going to school to learn these things.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids should be going to school to learn about all of these things. And we also should be learning about these things to not repeat it. We also should be learning these things to build up character. We also should be learning about these things to make sure that our kids know right from wrong and to be better than we were before, right? That should be the goal. And it really creates this aspect, as we've seen in education, as we've seen about policies across the board, of really pitting communities against each other. And then when we find that out, when that happens, and I just had this conversation about, in District 7, District 7 has, it is majority Black, but it has a significant Arab American population.
Very much so.
A significant Latino population.
Very much so.
And a significant white population.
Very much so.
Right? And, as I'm door knocking, like it'd be a street that you have all types of folks on the street. And then the things that I'll hear, I may hear things that you can tell that communities are being pitted against each other. But when it comes down to the actual problems that our neighborhoods have been disinvested in.
Yes.
And then folks are being made to fight for scraps within each other.
And also just from that environmental lens, so people kind of get an understanding of cities and spaces and zoning. District 7, the relationship to industry and residents, it's very locked in. Like,
yes.
Like your backyard could be like chemical manufacturing right there. Yes. Like it's not. It's almost like it feels like sometimes like just driving through D7 at certain spots and places, you would think like some of this, it's like, man, this don't even feel like Detroit. This feels like something along like the Eastern Shore or something. But that is D7. And then at certain times of the day, just the truck traffic alone changes the whole scope of like getting to where you need to go.
We often hear, and I keep bringing up on the doors because that's been what I've been doing. We have knocked, if not nearly 20,000 doors so far in this campaign. And how I look at public service is that, yes, I, as Denzell McCampbell, the candidate, may have ideas in my platform, but that has to be involved with what I'm hearing from residents on the ground. And quite often I hear from folks, whether it's off of Joy Road, whether it's off of Plymouth, whether it's off of Greenfield, or even, no matter what major road, Warren, right? You hear folks that we want more activity in our neighborhoods. We want to be able to walk to things such as going to get fresh food, affordable fresh food, going to health clinics. I want to be able to have my healthcare in the neighborhoods, a pharmacy, a coffee shop, or just somewhere to build community with. But instead, I have a car lot on the main thoroughway, or that used to be an old factory. It might be contaminated land. So when we think about what the role of a city government is in that, is to make sure that, one, our planning and zoning actually matches that. And I know there's been some work in like right-fitting the zoning in District 7, but there's still more to do to say, instead of this being a zone industrial place that also, like you said, right behind it is a home or a neighborhood that you have families in, how do we change that zoning to be, one, more affordable housing? It could be multi-unit housing. It could be mixed use that has multi-units on top and then retail on the bottom. Could be a community center that we have all these vacant buildings. We have vacant school buildings there. How do we change that into affordable housing as well? Or a senior center? That's the view that I want to bring to City Council, together, of course, with the Board of Zoning and all the City Planning Commission, to make sure that we're actually making sure that our planning and zoning fits what residents need in District 7.
And it's just one of those districts that, me being a West Sider not far from there, just even driving up Fullerton, because like Fullerton becomes more of a thoroughfare in D7.
Yes.
It's like it's a block over this way, you know what I'm saying? Like where people live. It just like the feel of it, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, just the memories of shout out to Chuck's Millionaire Club back in the day. A young guy in there. But yeah, so like that community is it all of, Detroit is different, but it's definitely certain things that are just very unique to D7 that aren't like a lot of the other districts because of that relationship. And then even how close it is to Dearborn and Southwest Detroit, it's like it feels different.
And you want to know on that note, I always get asked by folks, how will I deal with the competing interests around having jobs in District 7 and the interests of community? And I get frustrated when I get that question, because I think the reason why we are where we are right now, of neighborhoods being overpolluted and divested in, is because we look at that as competing interests. When I say that we need more things for people to do, that also means that we need more things to have good paying jobs in our neighborhoods. That also employs people in those communities. When I talk about more education and college readiness and skilled trades programs, that means that we are increasing the skills that folks have in communities, so that whether they want to be entrepreneurs or want to go work somewhere or want to go to college, that we have more of that in District 7. When I talk about equitable development, and there's this aspect that folks who are pushing for equitable development don't want new things in our neighborhoods. No, we absolutely do, but we also want to benefit from that and not have folks outside of our city or outside of our neighborhoods getting all the benefits from it. And so I just wanted to bring that up, as folks will say, as we're talking about, zoning and changing the way things look and are, is that it's not, we just want to make sure that folks are healthy and they have good paying jobs and they have their needs addressed. And that's how we're going to get thriving neighborhoods across the city of Detroit, not just in District 7.
All right, so now I'm about to put a pin in that, and we're going to pick up on that.
Okay.
But now we're going to go just Detroit is different flow. Where you go for middle and high school?
All right, so I did not go to Detroit Public Schools for middle and high school. I actually went to Cotton Creek Academy, was a charter, and then I went to Madison High School in Madison Heights.
Okay. All right, now you got to definitely tell me, what was going to Madison Heights School? What was that like? How did that feel? Break that down.
Yeah, so I went there, because it's all the decisions with my parents and such. But what I would say is that Madison High School was an interesting place because it was, of course, a school of choice, and it was open, and it was a lot of folks from Detroit going to Madison High Schools, and I will say it was. And you can go back if you look on Fox 2. I remember when there was the school board trying to close the schools to not be an open district anymore, because it also showed me the racism that existed in Metro Detroit, because you would hear things such as, "Oh, I don't want school of choice kids on our lawn," or "They just come and drop trash on the lawn." And folks are like, "Well, how did you know that they are school of choice?" Of course you were guessing that, because they were black, they were dropping stuff, when Madison Heights has black people that live in it, right? But that wasn't the point. You were being racist in that. But also, as I heard, as folks who often say that, racism trumps all, if you didn't have school of choice in Madison school districts, your district would close. You would not have enough enrollment. So growing up in that district in high school, I saw all of those things that I had a good experience with my teachers and my college as students, right? My friends as students, but I also saw the dynamic there and like some folks that were in community there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Madison Heights, if I'm getting this correct, that's out east, like kind of like near Troy, correct?
It was 11 and John R. 11 Mile and John R. Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
All right. So like Concordia is out that way too, but I think that's in Warren. But that district, so not so far from where your house is,
Yeah.
but still in that space. And you said there was still other Black students from Detroit coming out there, so you
Yes.
didn't feel so isolated. But what was the pace? Did it just pick up with like, okay, this seems like natural flow, or did you feel like you were missing out on something from like your friends that went to DPS?
I think I always felt like, yeah, I was missing out on something
Mm.
with the folks that went to DPS. I looking back, you can't change what has happened,
Yeah.
but I think for me it was the pride that folks have for DPS schools,
Mhm.
right? That is something that you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah, and Persian is
yeah, right.
Persian is definitely one of those schools. The
Exactly.
Doughboys love the Doughboys.
Yeah, so I that is something that I really admire for sure, and that's something that as I tell folks, because I don't shy away from not going to DPS schools. That's part of who I am. That's part of my history. But also, what I tell folks is that I went to Michigan State, graduated from Michigan State, then came right back to the city of Detroit, and have always fought for, especially where I can, around adequate and equitable public education funding.
Okay, and that brings me to the next topic.
Yes.
You went right into state. Why
Yes.
did you choose state, and what was the thought process in going to state?
I had always, I would tell you, I was going to go to Central Michigan University because I wanted to get into broadcasting, actually. That was
what form of broadcast?
I wanted to do sports broadcasting.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. So I had went up to Central Michigan, and I was also there for a drum major. I was a drum major, so they had like a camp there for band. So I went to band camp twice that season. But then I visited Michigan State, and I had friends who were also going there, but also they gave me more financial aid money.
There you go. So back to money in schooling connects.
Yes.
And then also as a they have like Walmart Wolverines. I'm a Walmart Spartan. I've always liked the Spartans. Really because I didn't like the way that the NCAA and I feel like the University of Michigan dealt with Fab Five, and then like right soon after you get the Flintstones and Mateen Cleave. So it's like this will be the team, and then it's just like like drew the lines, and I'm over here in the green, but I followed them. What era are we talking? Or were you still thinking sports broadcast? Because Michigan State's had some good teams, and then it's been kind of rough at times.
Yeah, no.
What era were you there at State?
To be a Spartan fan is something. So I graduated high school in 2009.
Okay.
And so I got on campus right as the Mark D'Antonio era started.
So you saw some good days on the football field.
Yeah, and with basketball, it's
gonna be up and down, but you in the mix.
Yeah, well, I was there. I think that was a Final Four run. Yeah, so it was a good time with sports. But so I went to Michigan State. I changed my major 5 times.
Okay, but you started in sports, possibly.
I started in like management, like pre-law management, because by the time I started school, I was like, oh, maybe I want to go to law school.
Okay.
So switch over to that. But then I also gotten more and more into politics. So also this is right after Barack
Obama's election,
so
2009.
So that really, and then I also had a teacher in U.S. history in 11th grade as well. So this was during that time I was going up to thinking about sports broadcasting. I also had this class that we were going through U.S. history, and then going back to how the childhood context that I grew up in, while thinking about the Jim Crow era and what Black folks went into, and then also studying the presidencies during this U.S. history, studying the presidencies and how folks approached that. That was also during the time you hear about this whole Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and then learning that no, he didn't really want to free the slaves. He cared more about this national aspect of keeping the country together than anything else.
Yeah,
right?
I like that you touched on that. I love to lift this up because it's like I get to speak and present this to people. It was quote unquote freeing the slaves was an externality, meaning like it was a economic income. It was an economic outcome that was not necessarily intended for what you were doing. So it's kind of like, I'm making this like if you're side betting in a dice game, you're not necessarily the person making the mark, but you get what's out. Two dynamics. The North was really losing. The Union was really losing to the Confederate Army, and welcoming in enslaved soldiers into the Union was a key in that victory. And also, at that point in time in American history, the Confederacy's economic prowess was completely built on this institution of enslavement. So if you allow this to continue, it's only going to be so long before you're going to end up losing this battle altogether, because clearly the apparatus and everything connected to this is so key. Hence, that's why those Confederate statues and the Daughters of the Confederacy, it's really deep, a lot of this stuff that they're taking away from history books, how it's so interconnected into things. But it's like, definitely is not the stance that I think a lot of people make of what Abraham Lincoln was saying. Even a lot of people saying Abraham Lincoln himself was black. Yeah. but it was more like you can't have that continue. It would be like, if I'm trying to think of another great example for a person, like if you have if you have a kid that you don't want to have no candy, and then you let them go trick-or-treating, it wouldn't be smart to let them go trick-or-treating because they're just going to get more access to candy. If the South would have kept on with this mechanism, then they would have only got more resources from Portugal, Spain, and many of the other nations that were supporting the Confederacy to eventually topple the Union.
I appreciate that breakdown. And that's something like, as we learned about that and went through the eras in this country, I realized a little bit around this aspect of government, right? Of this collective, because government, right? If you break it down at the basic things, it's supposed to be a collective body, a body made of collective voices that make a decision for a mass population, right? That carries out that, whether it's a city government is carrying out snow plowing for a neighborhood or a city, or a fire department, or whatever you may have it, a collective pool of resources and people. And I looked at it how the government in this country has been used to definitely harm and kill people.
Most definitely.
Continues to be, right? And also has been used to lift people up.
Very much so.
Right. And that really got me as I got onto Michigan State University. And I'll tell you what really got me into that is that when I was on campus, this was also during the time that the Larry Nassar, it was actually happening, but this was before it came out that the news broke about it. But I was also in student government while I was on campus. And I remember we were sitting at the table with university leadership, and we were pushing for more funding in the counseling center and the sexual assault program for awareness and to help survivors of sexual assault on campus. And we were saying, hey, you have folks who are going through a traumatic event waiting weeks, sometimes up to 8 weeks, to get an initial appointment in the counseling center. We need more staff there. We need to increase funding. You just increased our tuition, so we know you have it. And they sat at the table and told us, well, if we put more funding into that, we're going to have to take funding from the classroom. That was clearly a false choice. You had money to do so. You're pouring money into athletics, and your goal here as Michigan State University, right? As a form of, you're the governing body. These are folks, the governing body of this university. you are supposed to protect the well-being of students on this campus. You have students coming to you that saying that there's a need, and you're failing to protect them. And that showed me the power dynamic that existed on campus and the power dynamic that we see throughout in governing bodies and government, that folks have the choice between choosing to help protect folks and lift them up, or the choice in not doing so. And that really has got me, we see that so often in so many elements, right? It is a choice. Poverty is a choice to allow that to go on in the city or across the country.
I wanna hit some points definitely to what you said. So for people, Larry Nassar was a gymnastics coach from Michigan State, or that was coaching at Michigan State University, but he was also one of the lead Olympian coaches for gymnastics across the USA program. So like the gold medalist. Many of our most beloved gold medalists were sexually assaulted on Michigan State's campus and through trips via Michigan State's campus with Larry Nassar. This is happening in the shadows of what was happening on Penn State's campus with the football coach Sandusky. And then soon after, as we find out, even though much has not really been uplifted about the doctor on the University of Michigan's campus. So like this, adults taking full abuse of power
Absolutely.
of students and sexually assaulting them is not a Michigan State thing. It's
No.
not a Penn State thing. It's not even just a Michigan, U of M, MSU, and Penn State thing. This is something that's very rampant and allowed. And as you say, like people that are in these determining bodies. And more so, I think Larry Nassar is a classic example where, like, after it's exposed, it's more about who's at fault for, you know, coming up with the legal liability connected to this, than resolving the harms itself ever coming to light.
And I brought up, and you're absolutely right, and I brought up that this was on the backdrop of what was going on with Larry Nassar, because once the news broke, once it came to light, the response that you saw from Michigan State, people were very upset at the response that you saw from who was then the president of Michigan State.
Yes, that changed during that time.
Exactly. And people were surprised in the way that they reacted. And when I saw that, I said, I'm not surprised at all.
This makes sense.
Because they just, when we were at the table telling them that you had an issue with protecting students, they denied it and didn't do anything to change it. And that is where you always look back into how you get to a place that you are during the time. And it was those moments of seeing that happen. I also mentioned, as I was in student government, we had an autonomous student government. So we, not to get into the weeds of it, but the university, in a way to have more control over their student government, froze our funds so that we couldn't do anything with the student population. So trying to lessen our power to outreach. Me going through all of that really broke it down to politics in a way of, like, there are folks that use power to either oppress a people, to suppress a voice, or to harm folks. And we have to change that. And that's what has led me into this life of community organizing, of advocacy, of making sure that folks have access and be able to make their voices heard through voting. That's why I got involved into election protection and voting rights work.
Okay, and let's jump you right into that story. So you've already uplifted from state. You come back to Detroit. When you come back to Detroit, what era are we talking Detroit? And like I often ask people, even if you're gone for 4 or 5 years and you're visiting, like East Lansing and Detroit are close and you're visiting, but visiting and living are two totally different realities, you know? So what era are you coming back to Detroit, and what's happening in the city when you get back?
So when I graduated from Michigan State, I actually got an internship in Congress on a Hill in Washington, D.C. with the Victory Congressional Internship. So I did that. This was the summer of, I want to make sure I get these dates right. I think this was the summer of 2013.
Okay.
So this was also the summer of I believe this was the George Zimmerman trial, right? So as we're tracking, so I told you about the dynamics around power, and then in high school, dealing with this aspect around racism in education. And now, as I'm in DC, I'm in this hall of power, and also being a Black person in this country, and with Trayvon Martin being murdered, and then the George Zimmerman trial, and then this I wouldn't say full circle, but it's now this rush, and I think it was for a lot of Black folks in the country of seeing our folks being killed, and then also not finding justice for it.
I think just the difference in age, as close as we are, but just me being older than you, like that moment in time for a lot of people, I think in your generation that are graduating, that 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, like it was like right before Trayvon Martin, it was like a moment almost like not necessarily like the Black fatigue, but it was like that was further ago. We got more social media now. We're a little bit more cohesive. It was like a reality check that sparks a movement, and then like Mike Brown, and then you get activism around what becomes, and I separate the two. You have the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you have the Black Lives Matter organization.
Yes.
And the movement ends up being something, especially way more with Mike Brown in East St. Louis and just the dynamics of that, that really, I think, galvanizes and captures a lot of people such as yourself into like a lot more organizing.
It does. And I also credit the folks that I was in the cohort with, right? That in that internship that it wasn't just, we were also dealing with being in Capitol Hill, right? A place that I was in a cohort that was mostly people of color. So we were still in a place that was majority white, right? Colleagues, folks that were, of course, serving, right? And having to process what we were processing that summer, and also thinking about where do we go from here, right? I really credit the cohort in that internship for that. And then coming back to Detroit, I also came back to Detroit in the midst of bankruptcy. Right. So it's all of this is going on, and also being more involved in organizing around police violence, racial justice. I came back and I got involved in politics. More so, and I came back and ran a state rep campaign. Now the current state senator, Stephanie Chang, I ran her first campaign. I then went to do voting rights and election protection organizing. So I want to put this in context with folks. This was during the time where, right now we have early voting. We have no reason absentee voting. So you can get a mail-in vote with no reason. You just sign up. We can pre-register 16 to 17-year-olds. We can do same-day registration. That was on the ballot in 2018. So before that, you had to have a reason to vote absentee. We had a 2-week deadline for registration. 16 to 17-year-olds can register to vote. A lot of college campuses didn't have voting booths on campus. So think about how the voting power there is impacted, right? If I have to have a reason to vote absentee, it may not get to me, or it's my first time voting. We also have rules that it was my first time voting, you had to vote in person. So if I'm a student, I can't go home and vote, and there's no voting booth on campus that I can get to, I have been disenfranchised, right? I can't vote. So that was a lot of the organizing I did around that. I was a part of the early group that formed and resulted in the ballot initiatives that we saw with Promote the Vote and redistricting and and also just expanded access to the ballot box.
Definitely
right?
the People's Bill of Rights was in that mix.
Yeah.
It was a moment in time that it was more grassroots organizing
Yes.
was very prevalent for a lot of like initiatives to action.
It was folks saying, "Look, we have an issue here, and we're not gonna wait on anyone to solve it. We're gonna push forward with it." During that time, it's like also I was a founder member of the Black Youth Project 100 Detroit chapter. That we really pushed. This was part of the movement for Black Lives. So
BYP.
Yeah, exactly. And we were doing organizing, meeting folks where they are, and being in the community, asking a question around what does public safety truly mean for folks. And we were pushing back on the notion that you just had to fund police and then that would be public safety. We were talking to people about what public safety actually means, that folks have what they need in terms of housing, that folks have what they need in terms of healthcare, both physical and mental, that folks have what they need in terms of transportation, being able to get around, in terms of job, a quality of life. That we knew when we address those things, we actually make our community safer and we increase the quality of life for folks, right? That mass surveillance and hyper surveillance was not the way to go.
Well, this is another one of the more philosophical discussions and points of that, because there are people that argue and lean more towards crime is embedded in the actions of a person that would do something that is detrimental to society. So certain people that believe that these people are doing acts to be detriments to society. And then there's an argument that society itself has put people in conditions that create the symptoms of the detrimental acts. It's like society itself is failing. And in the philosophical debate of like which one comes first or how or where, I don't necessarily know if that answer will ever be necessarily an absolute, but I do know that the reality of living in a community where what's labeled as crime is prevalent, the functionality of it is definitely way more connected to a lot of quality of life issues than I think people just necessarily being defiant towards society itself.
And we see that day in and day out, right? I bring up the aspect around mental health care. You will hear from police themselves that say, I did not get into this to be a mental health provider. I'm not trained to do this. Just think about if we funded mental health care in the way that it should be, that we broke down the stigma for folks to get the care that they need, that we met folks where they are to say, hey, we're going to help you solve this together. And how that's connected to many of the issues that, whether it's around crime, a crime of opportunity, right? They call that, whether it's around housing, jobs, right? Like, you think about how we handle those aspects. If you think about also with the young folks in our city, increasing recreation, increasing mentorship programs. I always bring this up because it was in the conversation when we were talking about expanding or extending the curfew and changing the way that was fine. And there was a Free Press article that was a young person from the East Side that said, I got involved in a mentorship program and I saw that there was something different out there for me. And that's what other people like me need to see. So we connect, like we have to listen to the folks that are directly impacted by what we're trying to solve, right?
Now, here comes the politics of it. All right, and this is not even a Detroit is different opinion. This is a Khary Frazier opinion.
Absolutely.
I believe that it's balance in everything, what's constructive and what's destructive. I believe that Western civilization historically is more destructive. We're watching it play out right now. Fear is more of a motivating factor to cause action
Yes.
than substantive construction. I mean, I see it in my reels. Like if I have a reel and it's more something that's more from a lens of destructive, it's going to have way more views than something that's from a lens of constructive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a society itself that feeds into these things. So when I say this, I mean that, I've said this a lot of times. Cops need criminals. Judges need criminals. Jails for sure need criminals. It's a whole elaborate system. I mean, you can walk into a courtroom, walk in Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, and you look at judge and attorneys and bailiffs, clerks that are paid what I would consider in this market very handsomely salaries to deal with the challenges of people that possibly ain't got a pot or a window.
Yeah.
And this whole system functions in this space. It's going to always be prevalent. One of the things that really stands out, I went to Northwestern High School, whole different reality. Like some of the funding for Northwestern at the time when I was there had like some anti-terrorist funding into it. Like we had gang squad units inside of Northwestern. Now that's connected to monies that's set aside between a relationship between the Detroit Police Department and Detroit Public Schools at the time. Like this relationship is needed and this is a lucrative relationship. These 6 cops aren't coming up here every couple of days because they just care about the community. And I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying this is part of their job. So the weapon sweeps and the drug sweeps, they need to find something. I mean, it's like this goes into the political structure of a lot of things happening in this country. And I mean, definitely we can point out who's at, Pennsylvania Avenue, but it's not just him.
No.
The fear factor of causing response is a lot of what pushes the psychology, I think, of how we function in a lot of things.
You brought up the example of the reels that you post. I don't know if folks that are listening and watching this, right? There is a reason why what we're seeing on our timelines now is what they call rage bait, right? I don't know if folks have seen these text messages that folks say, "Oh, my significant other sent this about I did this," and mostly that's fake.
Mm-hmm.
But what folks are doing it for is that the algorithms on these social media platforms are bumping it up.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's getting them clicks, it's getting them more ad revenue, it's getting them more money. And I agree with you. It's the way the system is set up that, yeah, I look at it in this, as I brought back the whole that this policy is a choice and these results of policies is a choice, right? If we think about, you bring up the courts, right? If we're thinking about the function of government, we have gotten to a place where money is deeply engrossed in the function of government. And we see this with the services that
very
folks
much
bring,
so.
Right? When we think about services, people, like, for example, public transportation, people say, "Oh, well, public transportation loses money. It doesn't make a profit." Public transportation is not supposed to make a profit. It is a public service and good, right? When we think about but we never hear this conversation about tax giveaways to billionaires and corporations.
I mean, you never hear about defense contracting.
We never hear about
fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We never hear about war. We never hear about defense contractor. Like, the majority of our tax dollars is going to making bombs and killing folks.
Mm-hmm.
What type of society is that?
It's the society that has grown, and I mean, we can call it the military industrial complex or whatever, but like I think from it's been rooted in a very destructive system. Like, this goes back to tracking history. Like, even the way we look at history, we're not looking at history as you say, yes, America has done, America has provided beneficial things to nations and everything. Like, even a lot of the arguments this past year about like cutting USAID and how people looked at that. But USAID, when you study some of the history of it, has been connected to a lot of the co-opting regimes of a lot of foreign actors that were destructive to communities across the world. And it's been more so pushing the interest of American interests. And more so when I say American interests, not like me and you American, like American corporate interest.
American corporate interest.
You know, like the same as you talk about, quote unquote, freeing the slaves through those same externalities, other attorneys have found, okay, a corporation now functions as a human being as well.
It has speech, right?
Yeah. So it's like you have to engage with the corporation where it's, as even though this, you know, it's a group of people that have this corporation, but you got to interact with it as if it's a being itself that is autonomous from the people that are connected to said corporation.
Yeah. And you brought up a point around the aspect of like just how the system and how just the way things are. I gotten, this is a like this public service is my passion because like I know I'm running for Detroit City Council and it's a district seat, right?
Yeah.
And I have a platform that I intend to do a lot of good work around. And I also know a lot of these systems are much bigger than just a Detroit City Council seat, that it will involve a lot more folks on all levels of government, and it will involve folks on the outside. And it will be a system that has to look dramatically different than what we have right now.
I mean, I can point blank tell you, like in my own lifetime, I'm 43. So like nicotine and tobacco is a classic example in my lifetime. Like it was a lifetime where I know if you're younger, you like, it was like a lifetime where you would walk into a restaurant and they say, this is a smoking side, this is the non-smoking side. And it's like, it's no air filters, it's no like big wall or nothing. It's just like, okay, we're on this side of big boys and they're on that side of big boys. The information about what nicotine does to the human body was known, as we are aware of, in like the 1940s, right? But there were still universities, many politicians, some that we still, support now.
Yeah.
That like up to like 1990 were saying that it ain't that bad.
Yes.
And the reason now, and I went to business school, so like, ethically, my business teachers will say like, they're more ethical now. I'm like, not necessarily. All they did was they found new markets emerging where they can do whatever they want to do with the cigarettes. It's just like, okay, we don't necessarily need the American mafia now.
Yep.
We can go internationally to these other nations and make, the hot dog parts of cigarettes and sell them over there. So we aren't even looking at America as a territory that we need to actually sell our products to. But that was during my lifetime that I could walk in a lot of organizing for generations against that fight. Generations of people in my family that have had cancer.
Same.
And who knows, like, what else kind of connects? Like, because in my lifetime, you could walk into a restaurant, like I say, this is smoking, this is not smoking.
And yes, same. And I remember during my lifetime, right? I remember as a kid that was the thing. And to your point is that a lot of that changed, one, because they realized, like you said, their bottom line would be impacted here in the United States. So where do we find money elsewhere? The public opinion changed around that. So now the governmental entities say we have to do something around that. And that's also why I am so focused on this campaign and this work, is that I have noticed that a lot of folks are, there's an individualistic mindset that is really coming to folks because, and this is not to folks, the fault of our neighbors, is that folks are going without, right? So folks are in a way, what am I going to get out of this? What is it in it for me? And how will I get a better quality of life? So I believe we have to address those issues, those things, those questions. And I believe we have a platform around that with this Detroit City Council race on the pathway to rebuilding community aspects so we can actually be in community with each other and say, this is harmful not only to me, but to you, to us, to folks across the country, to folks around the world. And then we have to take that collective action because the folks who are in opposition to us and our livelihoods and our well-being are banking on us being fragmented and being separate. So then they can come to you with the disinformation, with the malinformation and say, this is what's happened, that your neighbor is the reason why you're encountering this issue. But when it's most likely not, it is that the rich want to get richer and they want to extract and exploit all communities to do so. And that's the fight that we're in right now. And that's the view and the foundation that I approach public service in is how are we centering the most marginalized folks and creating policies and resources to lift the most marginalized up? Because what we have to realize is that when you center everything around that, you're lifting everybody up because you are solving for the issues that are deeply impacting our communities.
But then you run into this. It was so funny. Like during COVID-19, it was many things that happened. It, like for anybody that's into like sociology or anthropology, like I think we're going to get study after study after study just on what human behavior happened around that time. But one key thing that happened around that time was with the unemployment, accessible and other accessible means to get money. A lot of jobs were like, people don't want to work no more. And the reality is, as a person that's had a fast food job in my day, it's like they never necessarily wanted to work there in the first place. So it's like these strenuous conditions, meaning high unemployment, is actually good for a lot of the corporate sector because now I can get a person to feel as though just having the opportunity for work is a scarce resource. Hence, one of the things about capitalism that I'm adamantly against, the whole concept of pushing scarcity. And two, you can heighten the value of this person to be more strenuous because of the scarcity. I'm willing to accept conditions that I never would. Whereas now that I have an option of a heightened quality of life, now parents come in and say, look, I'm going to need some childcare. I don't mind coming in, but we're going to need to have a place for childcare. I don't mind coming in, but we're going to have to share in this. Like now the boss, I mean, you know, and in my era, you know, it's like whatever the boss say, go. Like that evens up during this time in COVID, where it's like people are finding out like, wow, these relationships that you have with the people that are employed by you are not as strong as you thought. And the places that had better relationships with the people they work with were thriving.
When you think about, there's a reason why those bosses and corporation continue to attack collective bargaining, right? Because if you are able to say as a workforce, we demand these things, they can't then target you in that way, right? There is a reason, and I want to touch on this aspect that you brought up, scarcity. We see a lot of scarcity mindset from a lot of folks in Detroit.
I mean, but that's the fear also being pushed.
And by what I mean by what I say elected officials in Detroit, a scarcity mindset. Like, if we don't do this thing, we won't get jobs, right? If we don't do this for this corporation, we won't get the investments. We have to realize the assets that we have in this city. We have land, we have water that is servicing the entire region of Southeast Michigan.
And in some ways servicing the world.
And servicing the world, right? When people talk about the scarcity of water or the scarcity of fresh water, let's say that also we don't have a lot because corporations have destroyed it, right? They always bring up the Great Lakes. We sit on the Great Lakes. I brought up the land. People, right? We have all these assets, but yet a lot of the decisions that are being made are from a scarcity model. If we don't do this thing, we will go back to this. If we don't give this person what they want, a billionaire or developer this, we will go back to this. No one is saying to completely abandon all, but we can ask for more. We deserve more because they wouldn't be coming to us if they knew we didn't have what they needed. And the other part that I want to touch on is as you brought up there was someone who told me recently as I was reaching out to voters that, as I talk about affordable housing, I talk about transportation, and they said, well, what is in that for me? I'm someone who has worked my entire life, right? And we really have to break out of that mindset as well. When I talk about affordable housing, I'm also talking about the predatory investors that are going after folks who own their homes in our communities and saying that and targeting our seniors to say, oh, I'm going to give you $15,000 for your home because they know our seniors are in need. So they will say, oh, yeah, I'll take that when their homes are worth $80, $90, $100,000. When I'm talking about truly affordable housing, I'm talking about that our city is making sure that we are assessing our properties in the correct way. So we're not pricing people out of their homes and they're losing it through foreclosures, right? When I'm talking about violence prevention and mental health funding, that impacts everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It does not matter the income bracket, right? When I'm talking about making sure we have a responsive city government and city council office, no matter what amount of money that you make or how much you have worked, you are a resident of this city and you deserve to have trash pickup come on time. You deserve to have sidewalks that are not broken that will cause a safety issue. You deserve to have a public transportation system that gets you around the city, whether or not you have a car or you are able to drive around, because we are also facing high auto insurance rates, right? So we have to get out of the notion of this politics that is us versus our neighbor, because whether or not you have made it, we know that folks are 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in an emergency, because there's a deep wealth inequality in this country. That there are still folks at the top that whether you worked your whole life, they still want you to pay for outrageous rates for health care and health insurance, right? That they're still saying that, oh, we want to higher the Social Security age. So the system that you paid into, that because they're borrowing from it. It's not because they're running out of money. They keep borrowing from it to pay for war and bombs and to pay for tax giveaways for billionaires. So that's how I'm approaching this in that way, is that there is enough for all of us. And it is not, as you brought up the unemployment aspect, is that this was a global pandemic. None of us have been through that ever before, right? And instead of approaching it in a way that, how do we make sure we all get out of this, right? Many of us have lost folks in that. Many of us have been impacted in that ourselves. How do we get out of this together and make sure we have the support for folks that we need to get out of this? Instead, it was a conversation, how do we get folks back to work as quickly as possible? And we're still facing high rates of COVID-19 infections.
I mean, I think that's also as when Councilmember Tate was here. One of the biggest questions that I had for him was, a lot of the investments and tax abatements provided for the city is for a lot of office buildings. And I've been raising this up where, in even some of the most thriving metropolises across America, office buildings are very desolate. Because since COVID-19, people have not gone back to work. That's another one of those, when people talk about, now that you have to even things out, do I think a lot of people want their people back in the office? Yes. But the thing is, the person that wants you probably back in the office also wants to spend most of the week on the golf course themselves. So now it's the balance where people are like, nah, I really like being at home a little bit more. I like being with my kids. I like being in the garden. I like being with my family more. So let me come in 2 to 3 days. We have a city that's invested a lot into a lot of these office spaces when it's a lot of current office spaces that are still empty.
And that's where,
and to me, it's like, that looks like government provisions providing assets for corporations more so than people.
And that's, as I mentioned earlier on, that question around competing interests around economic development and folks in community.
Yep.
When we look at it in that way and competing interests, these dynamics come apparent. If instead we are saying this is where folks are, this is the work-life balance that they want to achieve, this is where they want to have some place to work closer to home, right? That they want to have a workplace that provides these things. In my view, we should have a city government and a government on all levels that tries to be a true partner in making that happen. It doesn't have to be competing interests. It can make sure that we have thriving communities for everyone. Everyone, yes, we want to have a nice downtown, but we also want nice neighborhoods. We want to be able to walk to nice places in our neighborhoods as well. And we want to be employed in those places, and we want to live in those places and enjoy it as well. I bring these things up, and I think it's also, we talk about the system. I'm someone who doesn't take corporate PAC dollars, right? If you look at my campaign finance report, you won't see any type of corporate PAC, any corporation on it, right? Because I deeply believe that folks have made decisions based on that money in politics. And I want folks to know this, that we talked about corporations wanting to make money. Corporations don't donate to elected officials because they like them or they're a nice person. They donate to them because they expect that person will deliver for them on something. And the reason why I reject corporate PAC dollars is that we should be beholden to the people that we are running to represent. If it's a policy that just so happens to line up, then that so be it. But I am beholden to the people that I'm running to represent. And this race comes down to that, right? Because, and I don't want to make this about my opponent, but on the other side, it's the complete opposite. So that's why I've been knocking doors. That's why I try to convey these policies that lifts everyone up. That's why I'm not afraid to speak out about the dynamics that we have in the city. Because if we continue to not invest in our in our neighborhoods, we will not see the population growth that folks are already, that everyone across the board says that we need to see in Detroit. And more importantly, the folks that we have here will continue to go without, and they will also leave because it would just be too unaffordable to live in the city of Detroit because their basic needs are not being addressed.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I agree on many of those points. But especially like affordable housing, as this is transitioned before my eyes into a predominantly renter-based city. And I've said this on the podcast before that another reality during COVID-19, those office buildings that are unoccupied, a lot of corporate actors that were in commercial real estate have now entered the residential real estate market. Like, I'm seeing the Berkshire, I'm seeing the Berkshire post outside of houses now, where I used to see Century 21. Berkshire is the holdings company of the guy in Oklahoma. I'm forgetting his name.
Buffett.
Yep,
Yeah.
Warren Buffett's holding company.
Mm-hmm.
So to think that a holdings company is interested in residential real estate throughout the city of Detroit, it's eye-opening to the shifts of what's happening just to residential real estate. And that shifting into, to me, like I say, more corporate actors. And as more corporate actors get into that, owning a home moves more and more further away.
Mm-hmm.
And hence that's where, shout out to definitely rights to renew, what's going to happen with the tenants association, and just discussions that just weren't in the pantheon of Detroit just for so long because it was such a big homeowner base here.
And you're exactly right. And we have to make sure that folks have a even playing field, right? We know that there are a lot of folks being taken advantage of when it comes to being tenants and renting. Like I said, there are a lot of homeowners that are being targeted. We want to make sure that folks that is affordable to live in the city of Detroit and folks have what they need, right?
Yeah.
And this is just out of reach for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, I would say between both these properties, I probably get like starting in like 2017. I probably got a postcard like once a year, 2017, 18, 19, 20. Since about 2021, I probably get like 3 postcards a year for like, I think, extremely low rates of like what is on paper of the value of the home. But if you're in a dire situation, I could completely see, and I've witnessed a lot of my fellow neighbors sell their property or lose their property just because of tax foreclosure.
Yes. And we have to, again, I keep reminding folks that these conditions and policies are a choice. And we need to make sure that folks are in office that can make sure that we're centering the needs of our folks in the city. And that's our residents, that's small businesses, that is stakeholders in the city that have been here, right, through bankruptcy, through emergency management. Because I truly believe when we're taking care of the issues that they are confronting, that we are confronting, then you create a thriving city that folks will then want to come to. This view of like, how do we bring folks here, I think is putting the cart before the horse, or horse before the cart. I said it backwards.
Yeah, I think, the best way to bring folks anywhere is to have cool folks be in the space.
Exactly.
And they're gonna do cool things, and that's gonna get more people to want to be with what's happening. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Which now, before we get to a close, it's like, man, this has been more of a policy and sociological discussion, which I welcome, but I do still want to get these other points.
Mm-hmm.
After you mentioned Stephanie Chang, then you BYP 100. Where are you going from there? Let's just pick up some of that story.
For sure. So I after running then the incoming rep Stephanie Chang's campaign, I did that voting rights and election protection work with an organization called Engage Michigan and the Michigan Election Coalition. I also did on the ground organizing work with a lot of groups around the city, helping them with communications, but also organizing together, right? And that's how I really got involved in the work around environmental justice, equitable development, really pushing back against really extracting and stripping away from our communities. In 2018, I helped out on Rashida Tlaib's congressional campaign.
That was a tough one.
It was she won by 900 votes, right? And then when she went to Congress, I became her communication director. So
what was that like? What was that experience?
It was. I did not have. I joke with her and I tell folks I didn't have gray hair before then.
Hilarious.
I didn't have gray hair before then, but
hilarious.
I would tell you all this is that it was an experience of a lifetime, right? Because as I talked about being back in 2013 in the halls of Congress, right? Mm-hmm. It was a different feeling then because I was not only in the role that I was in, but also I was there in the office of a member of Congress who was not afraid to speak up about what she believed and what she wanted for her constituents and centering that. And then I really saw the dynamics between folks who didn't take corporate PAC dollars and the folks who did, because she didn't take corporate PAC dollars. So I saw the ways that we could operate as an office, right? To say, no, this is what folks, then it was the 13th congressional, this is what folks in the 13th need, right? And I really admire that about her. Also the thing that the constituent services aspect, because we know government, especially on Congress, especially what we know now, the policies move slow. And especially if your policies that are not rooted in what corporations or corporate interests want, they move even slower. But people issues still remain. And Rashida always talked about solving people's day-to-day issues as much as she could in those constituent services while we worked on that transformational legislation that will solve that problem from not happening in the first place. And that was something that I really watched her do and the team do that I really learned from. And what I tell folks that I also brought to the table for me is that I learned about the appropriations process in Congress. A lot of the work that goes on is through committee staff and staff members and those relationships. And that's what I bring into this office, because Detroit will be in a position that we're gonna have to do more work to bring down those federal dollars because they're gonna be even more
scarce,
scarce
depending
to come.
upon the relationship
Right.
between especially a Biden administration and a Duggan administration.
Yeah, and after that, I left the office in 2013. Between there, let me step back. In 2018, I also ran for Detroit Charter Revision Commission, and I was on the commission. That's where we pushed the Detroit's Bill of Rights, which had a lot of environmental aspects, quality of life issues in there. A lot. It was really the blueprint of what we need to see.
I remember that's when I'm introduced to your work, especially. Shout out Nicole. Love Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey Nicole, if you're listening. That was pivotal work, right? And unfortunately the proposal didn't pass, but what we did in the commission really bringing folks to say, hey, what revisions do you want? Working together with folks on the ground, organizers, advocates to say, how do we want our charter to be shaped? That is something that will live with me forever, right? Yeah. And then so in 21, I ran for city clerk because voting rights, again, is important for me. I fell short. But in 2023, I left Congresswoman Tlaib's office, and now I'm the managing director at a statewide organization called Progress Michigan. We do a lot of work on the state level, especially with our legislature now. We don't have a budget, but we hold those folks accountable on the state level. So I worked on all levels of government, and I understand how they're supposed to work together, and I understand the power of each and what we'll need to do at the council table.
Now, I just have this question, just in that same commitment, especially in a lot of fights on behalf of the people. Now I got a question about your people. What has been the response of your family, your loved ones, the people closest to you, in watching your commitment to a lot of this work?
I'll be honest with you. My family has been a strong backbone in this work. Always been. And look, I'll call my dad and he's like, yeah, I heard something about that. I probably know a little bit about that. But at the end of the day, I'm his son and he has my back, right?
That's deep.
My mom, she passed away in 2020 from what we...
Rest in peace.
Thank you. And what we expected it to be COVID, right? This was before they were testing for it, right? Again, another policy choice that impacted people's lives. I remember, I always tell a story that when I ran for Charter Revision Commissioner, and it's like the love that your mom has for you, right? It's like, I had to collect signatures. And she had a signature sheet, and she went to the park, and I guess she approached the guy and said, "Oh, you should sign this for my son. He's running for a charter commission." And the guy said, "Oh, I don't know him. I'm not signing that." She's like, "What you mean you're not signing this? This is my son." And like in that way, but like in the passion, I always tell that because for folks who know my mom, they know that she would really get with you if she had an issue with you. But it was really my family just has that love that they're there for me time and time again. And I really wouldn't be able to do this without them because sometimes I tell folks like being a candidate for office really sometimes can feel like the most lonely thing ever, right? And it's very vulnerable, right? Because you're asking folks to support you, but knowing that no matter what, that you have folks in your corner, I'm really thankful for my family and thankful for my village for sure.
Yep. Knocking on that door after nobody else came to the door again. You get into that fourth house on the row. You sitting up here like, oh, man.
Yes.
And then that person like, get off my porch. And it's like, hey, I just got something to say to you. And then you hear, get off my porch 3 more times. And it's like, how do you stay inspired?
Yes.
The other people walking with you like, hey, man, can we just go over here and get something to eat, man? And it's like, nah, we got to keep going. Oh, boy. Yeah, that door knocking is.
Yeah. But it's the best.
That's how you pound that pavement.
And then, but the best thing, you'll get that. Yeah, you'll get the folks say, "Okay, get off my porch." You're like, "All right, definitely, I'm gonna get off your porch." But then you get the next door, and they're like, "Oh wow, I'm so glad you're here."
I mean,
it's here, right?
It's like door-to-door sales.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Oh man, this is way back in the day. The door-to-door sales job I had. It's like you would knock on doors starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, almost to like 3 o'clock. So you could establish houses where people were and were they not. And then really from like 3:30 to like 7 is the time you would already kind of have identified when to sell. But you get to know this person on the block. They'll tell you, okay, go over there, go over there, go over there. But it's a commitment thing.
And
It's a commitment thing.
And that's what you got. And that's what folks will get out of me as their city council person, a really committed person that really wants to involve folks and listen to them and really push for solutions at the table. Because our solutions are in our neighborhoods. That's where they are, period.
Definitely. All right, so classic Detroit is different questions now.
All right.
Very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
Yeah, it was a 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix.
Okay, a Grand Prix, I like it. Yeah. What year you get it?
I got it, I believe that was like that had to be 2008, 2009. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It had some years. Was it still clean?
It was still clean. Yeah, it had a leather interior, all that.
All right.
Yeah.
Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Oh, I probably went to the mall.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What you playing?
Oh, Before I Let Go.
Frankie Beverly and Maze.
I'm gonna mix in a little bit of the Beyonce version too of that.
Okay,
but yeah, all right. And then
gonna be some old people that what are you doing?
But you know, you gotta get them to the. And then the other song would be. I would play "Hello Detroit" by
Sammy Davis Jr.
Yes, exactly. I love that song. So yeah. Just to wrap out the fireworks, you know.
I'm with it.
Yeah.
All right, and last question: if you could rename Woodward after one Detroiter, who would it be and why?
Wow. I would name Woodward between. I would name Woodward after Mayor Coleman Young. Yes, because of just the what it means for Detroit, right? Of what Coleman Young meant for Detroit, what Coleman Young meant for Black political movement in Detroit. Beyond even, you know, the folks that he brought into the fold and when it comes to Black leadership. And for me, it's like that's the movement piece that we have to continue. We have to see now in this time that we really need.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Peace.